The alien princess mocked her human rival until she learned the truth about Earth's sacrifice. Lyanna sat in the front row of the Interstellar Diplomatic Academy and watched with barely concealed disdain as the human student fumbled with his presentation on trade negotiations. The other students whispered and laughed behind their hands. Humans were still such a novelty in galactic academia, still so awkward and out of place among species that had been navigating the stars for millennia. The human's name was Marcus Chen. He stood at the podium with his primitive datapad, his dark hair slightly messy, his posture less refined than the other students. He spoke about Earth's proposed trade agreements with the Outer Rim colonies, but his accent was thick and his terminology was sometimes incorrect. Lyanna exchanged knowing glances with her friends. This was exactly what she expected from a species that had only achieved interstellar capability 15 years ago. Lyanna was a princess of the Aetherian Empire, one of the oldest and most prestigious civilizations in the known galaxy. Her people had founded the Galactic Council 4,000 years ago. They had uplifted dozens of primitive species, shared technology, and maintained peace across hundreds of star systems. Aetherians were tall and graceful, with luminescent skin that shifted through soft pastel colors based on their emotions. They were natural diplomats, born with an innate understanding of complex social dynamics. Humans, by contrast, were short-lived and impulsive. Their technology was crude. Their culture was fragmented into hundreds of competing nations. They had spent most of their history fighting each other over resources and ideology. The fact that they had been granted admission to the academy at all was controversial. Many species felt humans were not ready for galactic society. Lyanna had been particularly vocal in her opposition. She had written articles for the Academy publication arguing that humans lacked the sophistication necessary for interstellar diplomacy. She had presented data showing that Earth's history was marked by continuous warfare, environmental destruction, and social inequality. She had made it her personal mission to prove that the Council had made a mistake in accepting humanity, and Marcus Chen seemed to be living proof of her thesis. When his presentation ended, the instructor, a wise old Zenthari named Professor Caxon, thanked Marcus politely. The human gathered his materials and returned to his seat in the back row, his face slightly flushed with embarrassment. Lyanna felt a surge of satisfaction. She had been right about humans all along. During the break, Lyanna approached Marcus with her usual confident stride. She was flanked by her two closest friends, Vera and Tom, both also from influential families. "That was an interesting presentation," Lyanna said, her voice dripping with false politeness. Her skin flickered with colors that any Aetherian would recognize as condescension. "Though I noticed you confused bilateral trade agreements with multilateral frameworks. That's fairly basic diplomatic theory." Marcus looked up at her. His eyes were brown, plain, and unremarkable compared to the multifaceted eyes of most galactic species. "You're right," he said simply. "I misspoke. Thank you for the correction." Lyanna blinked. She had expected defensiveness, maybe anger. Instead, he had just accepted the criticism without argument. "Of course I'm right," she continued, feeling slightly off balance. "Aetherians have been practicing interstellar diplomacy since before your species discovered agriculture. Perhaps you should spend more time studying and less time embarrassing yourself in front of the class." "I'll take that advice," Marcus replied. He gathered his things and left without another word. Vera laughed. "Did you see his face? Humans have no sense of dignity." "They're like children," Tom agreed, "stumbling around in a world they don't understand." But Lyanna felt oddly unsatisfied. She had wanted a reaction, wanted to prove that humans were not only primitive, but also temperamental and emotional. Instead, Marcus had simply agreed with her and walked away. It was frustrating. Over the following weeks, Lyanna made it her personal project to highlight Marcus's inadequacies. She would correct him in class, often unnecessarily. She would make comments about human culture, pointing out its violence and chaos. She would ask him questions designed to reveal gaps in his knowledge. Marcus never rose to the bait. He would listen politely, acknowledge her points when they were valid, and continue with his work. When she mocked human literature as primitive, He simply said that every culture had to start somewhere. When she criticized Earth's fractured political systems, he admitted that humanity still had much to learn about unity. His refusal to engage frustrated Lyanna immensely. She wanted him to defend his species with passion and anger so she could demonstrate how emotional and irrational humans were. Instead, he remained calm and humble, which somehow made her look petty by comparison. Professor Caxon noticed the dynamic. One day, he asked Lyanna to remain after class. "Princess Lyanna," the old Zenthari said, his wise eyes regarding her carefully, "I have noticed your interactions with student Chen. May I ask what you hope to accomplish?" "I'm simply pointing out the obvious deficiencies in human understanding of galactic protocols," Lyanna replied, her skin flickering with defensive colors. "The Academy's standards have clearly dropped if we're accepting students from such a primitive background." "I see." Professor Caxon folded his hands, a gesture that indicated serious contemplation in Zenthari culture. "Tell me, Princess, what do you know about the siege of Terminus Station?" Lyanna frowned. "The colony attacked 12 years ago. A raider fleet struck the station. Galactic forces repelled them. What does that have to do with Marcus?" "I suggest you research that event more thoroughly," Professor Caxon said. "The Academy Library has extensive records. I think you will find them illuminating." Lyanna wanted to ask more, but the professor dismissed her with a gentle wave. She left the classroom feeling confused and slightly annoyed. That evening, she went to the Academy Library. It was a massive structure containing physical and digital records from thousands of worlds. She found a private study pod and began researching the siege of Terminus Station, the basic facts she already knew. Terminus Station had been a major colony hub on the edge of civilized space. 12 years ago, it had been attacked by a coalition of raider groups seeking to plunder the station's resources and take hostages for ransom. The attack had been sudden and brutal, but as Lyanna dug deeper into the records, she found details she had never encountered before. The raider fleet had consisted of 47 ships. They had overwhelmed the station's minimal defenses within hours. Over 50,000 civilians were trapped on the station, including Aetherians, Zentharis, Valorans, and dozens of other species. The raiders had begun systematically looting and killing. The Galactic Council had dispatched a peacekeeping fleet, but they were 2 days away. The general consensus among military analysts was that everyone on Terminus Station would be dead by the time help arrived. Then, something unexpected happened. A human cargo ship had been nearby. The vessel, called the Iron Resolve, was registered out of Earth. It was captained by someone named Sarah Chen. The ship's manifest showed it was carrying industrial equipment and had a crew of only 37 people. When the Iron Resolve received the distress signal from Terminus Station, Captain Chen had made a decision. Instead of jumping to safety, she took her cargo ship directly toward the battle. Lyanna read the communication logs with growing disbelief. "Terminus Station, this is the Iron Resolve. We're coming to help." "Iron Resolve. Negative. You're a cargo vessel. You have no military capability. Retreat to safe distance." "Terminus Station, we're humans. We don't abandon people. Preparing for docking maneuver." The records showed that the Iron Resolve had somehow navigated through the raider fleet and docked with Terminus Station. The cargo ship's crew had boarded the station and immediately began organizing the trapped civilians, but the Iron Resolve couldn't evacuate 50,000 people. It was a cargo ship with limited life support, so Captain Chen had made another decision. She had ordered her crew to turn the cargo ship into a fortress. Using the industrial equipment they were transporting, the humans had reinforced key sections of the station. They had jury-rigged weapons from mining equipment. They had created defensive positions using cargo containers and construction materials. And then, with 37 people, they had held off raiders for 46 hours. Lyanna found combat footage from the station's security systems. She watched as human crew members, many of them barely trained in combat, fought with improvised weapons and desperate courage. She saw Captain Chen coordinating defenses while simultaneously keeping civilians calm and organized. The humans had no military armor, no advanced weapons, no tactical training for this kind of situation. But they fought anyway. Lyanna read casualty reports. 22 humans had died in those 46 hours. Another 11 were critically wounded. They had held their positions even when it seemed hopeless, even when retreat might have saved their lives. When the Galactic Peacekeeping Fleet finally arrived, they found the raiders in complete disarray. The human defenders had been so unpredictable, so relentless, that the raiders had focused all their attention on trying to break through the human positions. They had neglected their own fleet defense, making them easy targets for the arriving galactic forces. Captain Sarah Chen had survived, though she had been badly wounded protecting a group of Aetherian children. She had received the Star of Valor, the highest civilian honor the Galactic Council could bestow. Lyanna sat back in her study pod, her skin flickering through colors of confusion and shame. She had never heard this story. It had happened when she was young, and her tutors had apparently deemed it unimportant enough to skip in her education. She looked up Captain Sarah Chen and felt her heart skip. The image showed a woman in her 40s with tired eyes and a determined expression. In the background of the photo stood a young boy, maybe 8 years old, with dark hair and brown eyes. The caption identified him as Marcus Chen, the captain's son. Lyanna felt cold. She had been mocking the son of a hero, a woman who had sacrificed everything to save people she had never met, including Aetherians. But surely this was just one story, one exception. Lyanna spent the next several hours digging deeper into human involvement in galactic crises. What she found shook her understanding of everything. 13 years ago, a plague had swept through the Valoran homeworld. The disease was deadly to Valorans, but harmless to most other species. The galactic medical community had struggled to develop a cure because Valoran biology was so different from other species. Earth had sent volunteer medical teams. Human doctors who barely understood alien physiology had worked alongside Valoran scientists. They had brought a unique perspective because humans dealt with countless diseases on their own world. Their experience with rapidly mutating pathogens had proven invaluable. A human doctor named James Wright had developed the key insight that led to the cure. He had died in the process, infected when his isolation suit tore during an emergency procedure. But his research had saved millions of Valoran lives. 11 years ago, a solar flare had threatened to destroy the Xanthari colony of New Haven. The colony's shield generators were insufficient to protect against the incoming radiation. Evacuation was impossible in the limited time available. A human engineering team had been in the sector. They had developed a radical plan to use their ship's reactor to amplify the colony's shields. It was dangerous and violated multiple safety protocols. The human engineers had known they might not survive. They had done it anyway. All 6 human engineers had died when their reactor overloaded, but the colony shields had held. 30,000 Xanthari colonists had survived because 6 humans had decided their lives were worth sacrificing. 9 years ago, a terrorist group had taken hostages at a diplomatic summit. The group had sophisticated weapons and had threatened to kill all the hostages if their demands were not met. Galactic security forces had been paralyzed, afraid that any action would result in mass casualties. A human security consultant named Maria Rodriguez had volunteered to go in alone as a negotiator. She had no backup, no special equipment. She had simply walked into the compound and started talking to the terrorists. For 18 hours, she had negotiated. She had convinced the terrorists to release the hostages in groups. She had formed a connection with the group's leader, understanding his grievances in a way that the other negotiators had not. In the end, all hostages had been released. Maria Rodriguez had been the last to leave, walking out with the terrorist leader who had surrendered peacefully. She had later explained that she saw him not as a monster, but as a person who had made terrible choices. She had treated him with respect, even while condemning his actions, and that respect had been the key to peaceful resolution. Story after story, Lyanna found examples of humans sacrificing themselves for others. They were not all dramatic military operations or crisis interventions. Sometimes they were quiet acts of kindness that had profound impacts. A human teacher who had spent 20 years in a remote colony teaching alien children. A human farmer who had shared Earth's agricultural techniques with struggling colonies, asking for nothing in return. A human artist who had created a memorial for a tragedy on a world she had never visited, simply because she felt the victims deserved to be remembered. Lyanna realized that while humanity was young in space travel and unsophisticated in technology, they possessed something that many older species had lost over millennia of comfort and safety. They understood sacrifice. They understood that sometimes the right thing to do was also the hardest thing to do. Earth's history of constant warfare had not made humans violent monsters. It had taught them the value of life and the importance of protecting those who could not protect themselves. Lyanna left the library as dawn broke over the academy campus. Her skin flickered with colors of deep shame and regret. She had spent months mocking Marcus, trying to prove his inferiority, all while being completely ignorant of what his people had done for hers. She found Marcus in the dining hall, eating breakfast alone as usual. Most students avoided him because he was human, and association with humans was not seen as socially advantageous. Lyanna approached his table. Her skin was displaying colors of genuine humility, something most Aetherians rarely felt and even more rarely showed publicly. "May I sit with you?" she asked. Marcus looked up, surprised. "Sure." Lyanna sat down across from him. For a long moment she struggled to find words. Her throat felt tight. Finally, she spoke. "I owe you an apology. A profound one." Marcus put down his utensil. "For what?" "For everything. For mocking you. For disrespecting your species. For my arrogance and ignorance." Lyanna's voice cracked slightly. "I spent last night in the library. I learned about Terminus Station, about your mother." Marcus's expression became guarded. "I see. I learned about so many things humanity has done. The sacrifices, the heroism, the compassion. I had no idea. My education never covered these events, or perhaps I never paid attention because I was too busy feeling superior." "It's okay," Marcus said quietly. "No, it's not okay." Lyanna's skin flashed with colors of passionate sincerity. "I have been cruel to you for months. I made assumptions based on ignorance. Your mother is a hero who saved thousands of lives, including Aetherians like me. And I've been treating you like you're beneath me?" Marcus was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "My mother used to tell me that people fear what they don't understand. The galaxy sees humanity as violent because we come from a violent world. They don't understand that violence taught us the value of peace, that suffering taught us the importance of compassion." "She sounds wise," Lyanna said softly. "She was. She died 3 years ago. Medical complications from her injuries on Terminus Station finally caught up with her." Marcus's voice was steady, but his eyes showed deep sadness. "But she lived long enough to see me get accepted to the academy. She was proud that I wanted to continue her work in a different way. She believed that humans could prove their worth through diplomacy rather than just crisis response." Lyanna felt tears forming in her eyes, a rare occurrence for Aetherians. "I'm so sorry. I'm sorry for your loss, and I'm sorry for adding to your burden here. You came to the academy to honor your mother's legacy, and I made your life miserable." "You're not the first person to mock humans, and you won't be the last," Marcus said. "I'm used to it." "You shouldn't have to be used to it." Lyanna leaned forward. "Marcus, would you let me make amends? Would you let me learn about Earth, about humanity, about everything I've been too arrogant to understand?" Marcus studied her face, looking for signs of insincerity. Lyanna kept her skin in honest colors, hiding nothing. Finally, he nodded. "I'd like that." Over the following weeks, Marcus taught Lyanna about Earth. He shared human history, not just the wars and conflicts that most aliens focused on, but the art, the literature, the philosophy. He told her about human concepts like Ubuntu, the idea that a person is a person through other people. He explained wabi-sabi, the Japanese aesthetic of finding beauty in imperfection. He introduced her to human music, from classical symphonies to modern fusion genres. Lyanna discovered that human culture was incredibly diverse. Earth had hundreds of languages, thousands of distinct cultural traditions, countless ways of understanding the world. Humans disagreed with each other constantly, but they also collaborated in ways that produced extraordinary creativity. She learned that humans had a concept called hope. It was different from Aetherian optimism, which was based on calculated probability. Human hope existed even when probability said success was impossible. Hope was what had driven Captain Chen to take a cargo ship against a raider fleet. Hope was what had motivated human volunteers to risk their lives on alien worlds. Marcus also shared the painful parts of human history, the wars, the genocides, the environmental destruction. But he explained how humans learned from their mistakes, how movements for justice and equality had slowly transformed human society, how humans had gone from tribes to nations to a united planetary government in just a few thousand years. "We're not perfect," Marcus told her one evening as they studied together in the library. "We still have problems, still have conflicts, but we're trying to be better. That's what humanity is really about, not perfection, but continuous improvement." Lyanna's friendship with Marcus did not go unnoticed. Vera and Tom confronted her in the corridor one day. "Why are you spending so much time with the human?" Vera demanded. "People are talking." "Let them talk," Lyanna replied. "I've learned more from Marcus in the past few weeks than I learned in years of traditional study." "He's using you," Tom insisted. "Humans are manipulative. He's probably trying to gain social advantage by associating with Aetherian royalty." Lyanna felt anger flash through her, turning her skin into sharp red patterns. "Marcus has never asked me for anything. He's never tried to use my status. In fact, he treats me like an equal, which is more than I can say for most people in this academy." "You're embarrassing yourself," Vera said coldly, "and embarrassing your family. What would your parents say?" "They would say I'm finally learning what it means to be a true diplomat," Lyanna shot back. "Understanding other cultures, finding common ground, building bridges instead of walls. Isn't that supposed to be what Aetherians do?" Vera and Tom walked away without another word. Lyanna knew she had probably just ended those friendships, but she found she didn't care. Those friendships had been based on social status and shared prejudices. Her friendship with Marcus was based on genuine respect and learning. The semester continued. Lyanna's grades actually improved because Marcus helped her see diplomatic problems from different perspectives. He would ask questions that forced her to challenge her assumptions. He would point out cultural blind spots that Aetherians typically had. In return, Lyanna helped Marcus navigate the complex social dynamics of the academy. She taught him which gestures meant what in various alien cultures. She explained unspoken rules and political undercurrents that humans often missed. They became a team, balancing each other's strengths and weaknesses. The major turning point came during the Academy's annual diplomatic crisis simulation. Students were divided into teams and given a complex scenario to resolve. The simulation was incredibly detailed, with multiple factions, competing interests, and time pressure. Lyanna and Marcus were placed on different teams, which disappointed both of them. Lyanna's team was led by a senior student from the Kaltor species, known for their logical thinking. Marcus's team was led by a Draxel student named Kavin, who had a reputation for aggressive negotiation tactics. The scenario involved a disputed planet that had resources claimed by 3 different species. Tensions were high, and there was risk of military conflict. Each team represented one of the claimant species, plus there were teams representing the Galactic Council and various neutral parties. The simulation began. Lyanna's team took a traditional Aetherian approach, emphasizing cooperation, proposing resource-sharing agreements, and appealing to long-term stability. It was elegant and logical. Marcus's team took a completely different approach. They focused on the civilians living on the disputed planet. They brought up humanitarian concerns. They proposed solutions that prioritized the well-being of ordinary people over political gains. The simulation ran for 8 hours. Teams negotiated, formed alliances, and made proposals. Tensions escalated when one team simulated military mobilization. It seemed like the crisis was heading toward simulated warfare. Then Marcus did something unexpected. He requested a direct meeting with Lyanna's team, bypassing the formal negotiation channels. In the simulation rules, this was risky because it could be seen as weakness. They met in a side room. Marcus looked exhausted but determined. "This is going to end in war," he said bluntly. "Everyone is so focused on resource claims that they're forgetting about the 3 million people living on that planet. We need to change the framework." "What do you suggest?" Lyanna asked. "Stop negotiating about who owns the planet. Start negotiating about how to protect the people. Make that the priority," Once we all agree that civilian safety comes first, the resource question becomes easier to solve. It was a radical shift in approach. Lyanna brought the idea back to her team. The culture leader was skeptical, but Lyanna argued passionately that it could work. They restructured their entire negotiating position around civilian protection. They proposed an independent civilian authority to govern the planet, with resource rights distributed equally among the claimant species. The key was that no single species would control the planet politically, which removed the zero-sum nature of the dispute. Marcus pushed the same approach with the other teams. Slowly, the framework of the negotiation changed. Instead of three sides fighting for dominance, it became multiple parties working together to solve a humanitarian crisis. The simulation ended with a comprehensive peace agreement. No simulated warfare occurred. The civilians on the planet were protected. Resources were distributed fairly. It was the first time in Academy history that the diplomatic crisis simulation had ended with a complete peaceful resolution. Professor Caxon announced the results with barely concealed delight. "I have been running this simulation for 40 years. Students always get caught in the zero-sum trap. They focus on winning rather than solving the actual problem. This year, one student changed the framework entirely. Marcus Chen introduced a human perspective that transformed how everyone approached the crisis." The professor looked directly at Marcus. "Humans have a saying, 'Don't let perfect be the enemy of good.'" This simulation showed the wisdom of that philosophy. You found a good solution rather than insisting on a perfect one that would never work. "Well done." The other students applauded, many of them grudgingly. Even Cavan, Marcus's team leader who had initially resisted the civilian-focused approach, admitted that it had been brilliant strategy. After the simulation, Lyanna found Marcus outside the simulation center. He was sitting on a bench, looking up at the stars. "That was incredible," Lyanna said, sitting beside him. "You changed how everyone thought about the problem." "I just applied what my mother taught me," Marcus replied. "When you're in a crisis, save the people first. Everything else can be figured out later." Lyanna looked at him, this human who had taught her so much. "You know what I realized today? Humans aren't behind other species. You're just focused on different priorities. While we were advancing technology, you were advancing empathy." "We had to," Marcus said softly. "On Earth, if we didn't learn to care about each other, we would have destroyed ourselves. We came close many times, but enough humans chose compassion over conflict that we survived." "The galaxy needs to understand that," Lyanna said. "Humans have something to teach us, something we've forgotten in our thousands of years of comfort and stability." "Maybe," Marcus said, "or maybe every species has something to teach. We just need to listen to each other." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars. Somewhere among those points of light was Earth, the young planet that had only recently joined the galactic community. And somewhere else was Aetheria, the ancient world that had led the galaxy for millennia. Two different worlds, two different peoples, but finding common ground in the darkness of space. News of the simulation results spread quickly through the academy. Marcus became something of a celebrity, though he seemed uncomfortable with the attention. Other students who had previously avoided him now wanted to study with him, to learn his perspective. Lyanna watched his growing recognition with mixed feelings. She was proud of her friend, but she also worried that he was being tokenized. People were praising him as the exceptional human, which still implied that most humans were inferior. She decided to do something about it. Lyanna wrote an article for the Academy publication. It was titled, "What I Learned from a Human, A Princess's Apology to Earth." In the article, she detailed her own prejudice and ignorance. She described how she had mocked Marcus for months, how she had assumed human inferiority based on technological development. Then she described what she had learned about human history, about the sacrifices humans had made for other species, about the depth of human culture and philosophy. But she didn't stop there. She challenged the Academy's curriculum, pointing out that despite humanity's growing importance in galactic affairs, human perspectives were barely included in diplomatic studies. She argued that the Academy was doing students a disservice by not teaching them about Earth's unique approach to crisis resolution and humanitarian action. The article caused a controversy. Some praised Lyanna for her honesty and self-reflection. Others accused her of betraying her own species by praising humans too much. Several conservative Aetherian nobles demanded she retract the article. Lyanna refused. Her parents contacted her via quantum communication. Her father, Lord Theron, was a high-ranking diplomat in the Aetherian government. Her mother, Lady Seraphine, was a respected scholar. "Lyanna," her father said, his image flickering slightly across the vast distance, "we've read your article. Do you understand the position you've put our family in?" "I understand, Father," Lyanna replied, keeping her skin in respectful colors. "But I wrote the truth. I was wrong about humans, and I needed to admit it publicly." "You're a princess," her mother said gently. "Your words carry weight. This article will influence how people think about human integration into galactic society." "Good," Lyanna said firmly. "They should think about it differently. Humans deserve respect, not condescension." Her parents exchanged glances. Then her father smiled, which surprised Lyanna completely. "We're proud of you," he said. "When I was your age, I was too concerned with maintaining appearances to admit when I was wrong. You've shown real courage by acknowledging your mistakes publicly." "You're not angry?" Lyanna asked, bewildered. "We're Aetherians," her mother said. "Our entire philosophy is built on growth and learning. You've demonstrated both. How could we be anything but proud?" The conversation ended with her parents' blessing. Lyanna felt a weight lift from her shoulders. She had been prepared to defend her position against her family's disapproval, but instead found support. Professor Caxon also called her to his office. "Princess Lyanna," the old Zenthari said, "your article has caused quite a stir." "I'm aware, Professor," Lyanna replied, prepared for criticism. "Good. The Academy needs more stirring. We've become complacent in our teaching, relying on ancient assumptions rather than acknowledging new realities." He leaned back in his chair. "I'm recommending that the Academy revise its curriculum to include more comprehensive coverage of human history and culture. Would you be willing to help develop that curriculum?" Lyanna felt her heart race with excitement. "Absolutely, Professor." "Excellent. I'm also recommending that next semester you and Marcus Chen co-teach a seminar on cross-species diplomatic approaches. It would be the first student-led course in Academy history." "Marcus and I? Teaching?" "You've both demonstrated understanding that goes beyond your years. Lyanna, you've shown the capacity for self-reflection and growth. Marcus, despite facing constant discrimination, has maintained dignity and compassion. These are lessons that need to be taught." Lyanna left the professor's office feeling overwhelmed and energized. She found Marcus in the library, as usual, and told him about the professor's proposal. "Teaching?" Marcus said, looking slightly panicked. "I don't know if I'm qualified for that." "You're more qualified than you think," Lyanna assured him. "You've already been teaching me for months. This would just be a bigger classroom." Marcus thought about it for a moment. Then he smiled. "My mother would have loved this. She always said that humans needed to be teachers, not just responders to crises." "Then let's honor her memory by doing this right," Lyanna said. They spent the rest of the semester planning the seminar. They decided to structure it around case studies of cross-species cooperation, highlighting both successes and failures. They would examine situations from multiple cultural perspectives, showing how different approaches could lead to different outcomes. Word of the seminar spread. When registration opened for the next semester, it filled up within hours. Students from every species in the Academy wanted to take the course. The semester ended with final exams and the traditional graduation ceremony for senior students. Marcus had another year at the Academy, but Lyanna was in the graduating class. At the Udain ceremony, Professor Caxon gave the keynote address. He spoke about the nature of wisdom, about how true understanding requires the humility to admit ignorance and the courage to change. "This year," the professor said, "I watched a student transform completely. She came to the Academy believing she knew everything because her species was ancient. She leaves having learned the most important lesson of all, that every culture, no matter how young, has wisdom to share." He gestured to Lyanna. "Princess Lyanna of Aetheria has shown us all what it means to grow. She will graduate with highest honors, not just because of her academic achievements, but because she has demonstrated the true spirit of diplomacy, the willingness to understand others even when it challenges everything you believe." The audience applauded. Lyanna felt her skin cycling through colors of gratitude and humility. After the ceremony, Lyanna found Marcus waiting for her outside the hall. "Congratulations, Professor Lyanna," he said with a teasing smile. "Don't call me that yet," she laughed. "We're teaching together, remember? I'm not your superior." "No, but you're my friend. The first real friend I made here at the academy." Lyanna felt emotion welling up. "You changed my life, Marcus. I was arrogant and ignorant. You showed me a different way of seeing the universe. And you gave me hope that the galaxy could accept humanity for who we are, not just what we can do in a crisis," Marcus replied. They stood together, looking up at the stars. Above them, ships came and went from the Academy's orbital docks, each one carrying students from different worlds, different cultures, different ways of understanding existence. "You know," Lyanna said thoughtfully, "there's a human concept I've been thinking about. You told me about it once. The idea that we're all connected, that what we do affects everyone around us." "Ubuntu," Marcus said. "I am because we are." "Yes, that. I think that's what the galaxy needs to understand. We're not separate species competing for dominance. We're all part of one community. Humans understand that because you had to learn it to survive on Earth." "Maybe," Marcus said, "or maybe we just got lucky that enough humans figured it out before we destroyed ourselves." "Don't discount luck," Lyanna said with a smile. "Sometimes the universe gives us exactly what we need, exactly when we need it, like placing an arrogant Aetherian princess next to a patient human student in a classroom." Marcus laughed. "You think that was the universe's plan?" "I think the universe works in mysterious ways, and I think humanity arriving in galactic society at this moment, when so many species have forgotten the value of sacrifice and compassion, is not a coincidence." They walked together toward the residential quarters. Tomorrow, Lyanna would begin her diplomatic career with the Aetherian government. Marcus would continue his studies. But they would see each other again next semester, when they would teach their seminar together. Years later, Lyanna would become one of the most influential diplomats in the Galactic Council. She would be known for her ability to bridge cultural divides, to find common ground where others saw only conflict. She would champion human integration into galactic society, arguing that humanity's unique perspective was essential for the galaxy's future. She would often tell the story of how a quiet human student had taught her the most important lesson of her life, that wisdom was not about how long a civilization had existed, but about how much compassion they showed to others. And she would always remember Marcus Chen, the son of a hero, who had carried his mother's legacy with quiet dignity, who had faced mockery with grace, who had taught an arrogant princess that real strength came not from feeling superior to others, but from recognizing the value in everyone. Marcus would go on to become a prominent mediator, called upon to resolve conflicts across the galaxy. He would use his mother's lessons, combined with what he learned at the academy, to prevent wars and save lives. But he would never forget the Aetherian princess, who had the courage to admit she was wrong. Their friendship would endure for decades, a living symbol of what was possible when different species truly tried to understand each other. The Galactic Academy would continue to train diplomats from 100 worlds. But after Lyanna and Marcus's seminar, the curriculum would never be the same. Students would learn about human history alongside Aetherian philosophy. They would study Earth's concept of hope alongside Xanthari logic. They would understand that every species brought something unique to the galactic community. And in classrooms across the galaxy, professors would tell the story of a human boy and an alien princess who proved that friendship could bridge any divide, that understanding could overcome prejudice, and that sometimes the youngest species had the oldest wisdom. Because true advancement was not measured in technology or longevity. It was measured in the depth of compassion, the strength of integrity, and the willingness to admit when you were wrong and learn from those you once dismissed. That was the lesson that echoed through the halls of the Galactic Academy long after Lyanna and Marcus had moved on to their careers. A lesson taught not through lectures or textbooks, but through the simple, profound act of two people from different worlds choosing to understand each other. And in the grand archive of human achievement, in the records kept on Earth of humanity's contributions to galactic society, there would be a special entry about the siege of Terminus Station, about Captain Sarah Chen and her brave crew. And beside that entry, there would be a note about her son Marcus, who had carried forward her legacy in a different way, who had shown the galaxy that humans fought not just with weapons, but with words, with empathy, with the unbreakable belief that every life mattered. The galaxy had once seen humanity as primitive and young, but people like Marcus and those who learned from him helped the galaxy understand the truth. Humanity was not behind. They were simply walking a different path, and that path had wisdom the older species desperately needed to relearn.